Okay, so for our first session, we thought it would be important to teach youth about developing effective study strategies because as you advance through STEM classes in high school, in college, and in graduate school, there'll be more and more information to memorize and kind of more difficult topics that you'll have to study really hard for and spend more time studying for. So as you develop these skills early on, whether you're in middle school, in high school, this will be very helpful in helping you understand the material that you're learning in college and kind of make it easier for you to earn good grades, which is super important if you want to go to graduate school or any form of higher education. Sorry. Okay, so first we're going to talk about like academic resources. So when you're studying, it's important to reach out to your mentors for help. And a lot of people aren't really like aware of these resources. But you can always talk to your teachers or your professors who are there to answer any questions that you may have or any concepts that you might be confused about. So for me personally, I'm sometimes scared to approach my teachers. And then sometimes if your classes are back to back, you might not have time to like line up and ask your teacher questions. And so to overcome this, I usually just like send emails to my teachers when I have questions. That kind of helps me ask questions while not being intimidated. And hopefully that helps you too. And you can also reach out to teaching assistants or your TAs. These are usually students who have taken the class and they're volunteering their time to help you. And you can also talk to upperclassmen who have taken the class because it's like they're most familiar with it, and then you can also ask them like whether the class was hard and how they studied for it. And some schools have academic coaches or like counselors or different types of advisors, and if you're studying with a class they can kind of give you advice on how to boost your grade and how to like study for it and how to navigate the process. And then some schools also offer tutors, and these can be an important resource because they most likely took the class and performed well and they're passionate about the subject and they went on to tutor it. And so finally, it's important to make friends in your classes. This is important because like if you miss a class one day and you need the notes, you can like reach out to your friends and your peers who are also in the class and probably have notes. You know, so like compare notes and you can study together. And because they're going through the class with you, they probably know the concepts best. Like sometimes when I asked the upperclassmen for help, they didn't really remember the concepts because it had been like a year or two since they took the class. And so these are like three main concepts that help you better remember the material from your classes. And this is kind of based on research in the brain and kind of the different neural connections that are made when you study with these strategies. So the first strategy is spaced repetition. And this is when you study over an extended period of time. So if your class takes place on a Monday, you might study your notes that night and then again on like Wednesday night, and then again on Saturday night, and then maybe sometime next week. And so there's not like a set period for reviewing your notes, but it's important to review them every few days or like once a week so you don't like completely forget it when a test comes. And basically, when you're like recalling it over and over an extended period of time, that helps you better remember it. And it's not completely blank when by the time the test comes. And so basically, you just want to space out the times that you're reviewing your material so that you're repetitively reviewing those concepts and getting it into your head. And this helps you form connections between ideas. And then as the lectures go on or as the classes go on, you can start building upon these ideas and connect them. And then that helps you kind of remember them better. And this method can get a little difficult after a few classes because you'll be reviewing a lot of notes. But like if you stick to it, you can try like simplifying your notes and condensing them to the very important topics or the ones that you're having trouble remembering. It can be very helpful for remembering these concepts. And the second strategy is active recall. And the name kind of speaks for itself because you're actively recalling the information that you're learning. And this method can be carried out through flashcards. So you can make flashcards based on your notes using platforms like Quizlet and Anki. And sometimes your teacher might give you practice tests, or you can make your own practice tests. And when you're doing practice tests, it's very important to remember the questions that you got wrong and the concepts that you don't fully grasp, because these are like the ideas that you should spend more time reviewing. And this kind of helps you navigate your studying process because you can kind of use flashcards with spaced repetition, and these ideas can kind of be combined. And then the last and one of the most important study strategies is like being able to explain concepts to others because this shows that you truly understand the material that you're learning. And so when you're explaining these concepts, it's important to use your own words because it's not super helpful if you just repeat what the textbook or the slides say. And sometimes it can be intimidating to explain concepts to others. So what I usually do is I write down everything I know about a subject, just write it down on a piece of paper or I type it on a document. And then I look back at my notes for like the different lecture slides and kind of find things that I remembered wrong or things that I'm missing. And then I'll like fill those in and kind of highlight those. And then I'll do the whole process again so that I remember the material. And these are strategies that work for all classes in general. But in the next few slides and for the rest of the session, we'll start categorizing different classes and kind of teach you different ways to study for those different classes. So we're going to talk about two general types of classes. One is a memorization-based class, and the other is a problem-solving class. So it's very important to distinguish between these two because there are different ways to study for these classes. And in our memorization-based classes, we have subjects such as biology, neuroscience, physiology, public health, and humanity. And humanities basically embodies all history and English classes. And these are the classes where you kind of draw from a textbook or like the book that you're reading. And you're required to like memorize a lot of concepts. So in biology, you might have like different cycles, like the oxygen cycle or like photosynthesis that you have to memorize. In neuroscience, there's like different systems in the brain to the different parts of the body. And then in humanities, obviously, there's like a book and you have to analyze it and you have to remember things for like history and stuff. And so the exams for the memorization-based classes will usually be multiple choice or you'll have to like recall information. So like if you had an free response question, then you'd have to like answer with like a paragraph or a sentence, and you recall that information like on your own based on memorization. So like an example of a question for this class might be like, which bodily system is responsible or which bodily organ is responsible for pumping blood to different parts of the body? And you might have like different options like A, B, C, D, and A might be like brain, B might be the heart, C might be kidney, and then D might be your bones. And then basically you just choose like B because it's the heart. And then the second type of class is problem solving class. And here we have math, we have chemistry, physics, and epidemiology. And in these classes, you have to remember like formulas and you have to use these formulas to solve problems. So it's much less like a memorization class, but more like a problem solving class based on the formulas. And the exams for this class, you might have multiple choice questions where you have an answer and then they give you like four options with different numbers and you choose. Or it's usually free response questions. So they'll give you a problem and you have to like show your work when you're solving the problem. And then there are some classes as you advance further that are a little bit of both. So if you're planning to go into medicine or any form of like science, you might have to take organic chemistry. And this kind of falls into both memorization and problem solving because you have to like memorize different elements of the periodic table, different numbers, different charges of ions, and you have to use those to solve the problems. So for these classes, you would have to use a little bit of both. We can definitely talk about those if you guys have any questions about them. So first we're going to talk about the memorization-based courses. So you should like skim the textbook because that's where most of the material will be. If your teacher tells you to read specific chapters or specific sections, you can skim that section and then take like brief notes on it. And then during class, you should take notes on what the teacher is saying. And if your teacher is using like a slideshow to teach your concepts, you should probably like take notes on the slides because that's probably where the most important information is. And then if your teacher sends out their slides, so you can ask them to send out their slides, maybe it can be helpful to like look over those slides or like annotate those slides and take notes on those slides. And then after class, if there's something that you missed or if there were concepts that you didn't understand, you can ask your teacher to clarify those or like to repeat those. And then you can also email them if you don't want to like talk to them face to face. And then so finally to like study for these classes, it's important to like write practice questions based on your notes and answer these. And you could also like make flashcards because that's like important for like recalling this information because it's like a memorization based class. And if you're doing like the practice questions or practice tests, you can look closely at the questions that you got wrong so you don't repeat the same mistake on the actual test. So in the next few slides, I'm going to show you some example of the notes and questions that I took for memorization-based classes. So the first one is a biology class that I took. So this is before the lecture. These are the notes that I took on the chapter. So it's very important to like write key concepts and draw important diagrams. You can also highlight headers and important vocabulary and ideas. And so generally, like if you know a concept, you don't need to write it down because it'll like make it harder to read, and then it'll make it harder for you to find the concepts that you're actually confused about, like the new concepts that you need to memorize. So this is how you make like your notes more complex. And if you guys have any questions about like note taking, you can feel free to reach out to me or like stay after this session and I can like answer questions, because I know in middle school and high school I just like wrote everything down. I didn't know how to like summarize it. So it's definitely important to like develop skills in like note taking too, because that's the basis of like what you'll need to study. So kind of note taking and study strategies are really interrelated. And so in this next slide on the left side, you can see this is like the lecture notes that my professor sent out, and these are the annotations that I made during class. And then after class, or like a couple days after class, I would write notes in the margin. So the blue here is like the different questions. The purple is my answer to the questions, and then you can see in red there are a lot of there are errors here. And these are the things that I would look at more closely if I'm doing like a second round of looking through this. And then you can do this multiple times. So you can like write questions and then erase it, and then or erase your answers and then like do it again so that it's like instilled in your head. And this is really helpful for like remembering these concepts and like recalling this information when the test comes. And now for the problem solving based courses. So for these courses, I don't think you have to read the entire textbook. I would just skim the textbook and then write down the important formulas that you have to use. And then, so like an example of this is like for math, you can write like y equals mx plus b, and then label the different parameters in your formula. So like m would be the slope, b would be the y-intercept. And then sometimes the textbook has like practice problems and it shows you how to solve such problems step by step. And here I would just try the practice problem on my own and then check the answer. And if I get it wrong, I would follow along with the explanation and then make sure that I understand the question and how to get to the answer. And then I would repeat the problem a few hours later and then keep doing that until I get it right. So this is like kind of hard to like visualize. So I kind of pulled up um, something that I was working on yesterday. So I'm taking a physics class this fall. And so this is like our physics textbook. And here are like the formulas. So I wrote down the formulas in my notebook. And then here there's like a practice problem, like example 2.9, free fall, falling monkey. And then here's the question. So I would just look at this and then attempt this question on my own. And then after that, there's like a whole process of like how to solve it. So they teach you the setup, which formulas to use, they have diagrams, and they teach you how to solve it. And there are several practice problems here. So that's what I would do. And this is like how I would build a better understanding of it, kind of like before the lecture. Okay. And then back to the slide. Okay, and then so to study for these classes, you would continue to do practice problems, because I feel like problem solving based courses, it's like important to do practice problems so that you're familiar with the problems and you kind of are aware of the scope of the different types of problems. So sometimes you might have to solve for one variable, sometimes you have to solve for another, and then sometimes there are like different steps and some are more convoluted than others. And then I also find it helpful if the teacher gives out like worksheets, you can use those to practice as well. And I would also take like practice tests if they're available. And if they're not available, I can like make my own by changing the numbers in the practice problems. And so for some classes, it might be helpful to like memorize constants. So just in a really simple example, like in math, you might have to do like, you might have to memorize like pi is 3.14, and like in physics, maybe gravity is like 9.81 meters per second squared. But like as you advance into more difficult classes like organic chemistry or chemistry, you might have to memorize like Planck's constant, Avogadro's number, or like different charges or pKs, and that's like really important. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you some of my notes and like worksheets from organic chemistry, which I took last semester. So here you can see that there are a lot of errors on this page. And what I do is I usually highlight or circle the problems that I got wrong, and then I redo them. And then if I still get it wrong, then I look at the solution and I write out the explanations along with the correct solution. And then I wait about an hour or until I forget the solution, and then I do it again. And then on the picture on the left here, you can see the errors as well as the solution that I wrote. And then on the right, there was a problem that required a formula in order to solve it. And so I wrote out the formula as well as the meaning of the parameters and the calculations and what like the different results of the calculation mean. And this was helpful for solving the problem. And then I also want to share some study resources that I use. So for making flashcards, you can use Quizlet, which is like a general, like a free resource that a lot of people use. And then for a lot of medical students they recommend Anki, which is another kind of platform for creating flashcards. And for note taking, on an iPad, you can use Notability, which does have a small fee, but I use Microsoft OneNote, which is free. And then it's also helpful to take notes on paper or on a computer. I think it's just whatever is most useful to you. I think like when you're writing it, it helps you remember it better and summarize it more. If you're typing on a computer, you can type a little bit faster and record more information from lectures. So it's just a matter of preference. And then it's also important to manage your time while you're studying so that you maintain optimal focus. So one of these methods is the Pomodoro technique, and that breaks down your study sessions into 25-minute sessions. And then this is followed by a 5-minute break, and that's followed by another 25 minutes of studying and another 5-minute break. And then you'll have like longer breaks after extended periods of time. So you can like type in your tasks and it'll tell you what the timing is like and how long it might take. And to find this, you just go on Google and you can find like Pomodoro. And then it comes up as this one, PomoFocus. So I can put this in the chat too if that's helpful for you guys. Okay. And then there's also it's actually really important to like relax your eye muscles and like kind of so there's like a 20-20-20 method, which is where you look away from the screen every 20 or so minutes and you try to look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. I'm not sure if it helps with like studying, but maybe it like helps with your focus, but I think it most definitely helps with relaxing your eye muscles so that you're less tired. And then some people like to listen to music while studying. And so my recommendations in terms of that is like I usually listen to pop music to stay awake or to like just to enjoy it. But when you're studying, I think it's important to choose something more mellow. So some people settle for lo-fi music, classical music, or piano music, and that's a little bit less distracting. So it allows you to like concentrate on what you're studying. And then there are a lot of like study playlists on Spotify and on YouTube that you guys can look at. And then I know I just went over a lot of information. Are there any questions? You can feel free to like ask or you can put them in the chat. And then I'm also happy to show any like notes that I took. So here is something that I wrote a couple days ago. Let me try. Okay. So we were learning about like alcohols. And so here is like things that I took notes on. And so for some of them I like drew it out and for some of them I typed it out. Um, and so this kind of like these brief notes kind of like help me to remember it. And then on the side here, I did like practice problems. And as you can see, like I mentioned in the other side, there's like errors in red. And so after I made the errors, I kind of like checked and I kind of looked to see if I understood it. Um, and then after that, I can like go back and redo them again, just like redo the ones that I did wrong. Um, yeah, I'm gonna check in case there are any questions in the chat. Um, yeah, but if you don't want to ask in front of the group, you can definitely like stay back and ask as well. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the slideshow. Um, yeah, so I think I just got a notification that we're running out of time, but I just wanted to talk about like the next session. So this fall, our team has a lot of like sessions planned for you. And it's good that we have like a small group so that we're able to like talk about these topics and you guys can ask questions. This is especially true for our session in 2 weeks, which is about dissecting scientific research papers. And this is important whether you go into STEM or not, because in all fields you'll have like you have to read papers to kind of draw from new research that's going on in that field. And so in a lot of my classes, I had to like read papers and write reports for it. And I actually have to read a paper like this weekend. So this is like one of the papers that I had to read. And obviously it's really long, and it's like it can be hard to understand. So we'll kind of teach you strategies to better understand those, so that you can like more easily analyze them when you're in college and when you actually have to use them. Um, and so next week, we're going to have another volunteer talk about STEM career pathways, and like different majors you can choose in college. And then obviously we'll be having our session on scientific literacy. We're going to start with review papers because those ones are a little bit easier. They don't include too many graphs or analyses. It's mostly just like a scientist looking at another scientist paper and then writing a summary on that. So that'll be a little bit easier as an introduction. And then on October 1st, we'll talk about like preparing for a medical career as like a high school student, as a middle school student, what you can do early on to prepare for that. And then on October 15th, we'll talk about research papers, which are a little bit more difficult, but hopefully from the background that you gain from the review paper, it'll help you analyze the research paper. And then on October 22nd, we'll talk about different skills required for a career in medicine and how you can develop those skills. And then on November 5th, we'll talk about common biomedical research methods. So whether you're pursuing a career in medicine or a career in a PhD or different science fields, you'll most likely have to like participate in lab classes or like work in a lab, and it's important to like know the different techniques. So like using pipettes, different types of pipettes, and then maybe like electrophoresis or like Western blotting, if you go into more advanced um, science laboratories. Sorry, and then we'll also have like cell passaging and different methods, and then we'll like teach you about those. And then our last session will be on November 12th, and we'll talk about like current events in medicine, kind of future directions for this field, and kind of like what you'll encounter if you take part in like the field of medicine or the field of science. And all of these sessions will take place on Sundays from 11 a.m. to 11:40 a.m. Pacific time. And the Zoom link is the same for all of them. This is the one that you should have received by email. Okay, I think this is a question in the chat. Okay, how long do you study every day? I think it kind of depends. So at the beginning of the semester, you study like a little bit less, and then when midterms come or like when finals come, you'll have to study a lot more. So it's kind of like a wave. It's like it's low sometimes, high sometimes. And then in high school, I definitely did not study as much. In college, in the first semester of college, I took neuroscience and chemistry, public health, and English class, and it kind of stacked up to a lot because there was a lot to memorize. So I've like kind of learned to develop different strategies to more effectively study, so that I'm not studying as much. But I think in addition to studying, you also have to like take notes prior to lecture and then take notes during lecture and then review it after. So, can I go into more detail about my note system? Color structures? Yeah. So usually I take notes in like white or black. And then if there's like a header or if there's like really important information, I'll highlight that in a color. I try to keep it organized with like different headers so I know where to look for it. And like I said earlier, like if I know some information already, I won't like write it down because that's like a waste of space. So I have like on paper notes. So I take notes on an iPad, and then this is like this is like one chapter. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. Let me see. Yeah, so like, oh, it's blurry. Okay, but for my physics class, I just wrote down. I spent one page on like a chapter, and I just wrote down the formulas, and then I wrote down important concepts from problems that I missed. So that's like important if I want to look back, then I can just look directly for the things that I missed. Um, and then I think for my, let me see. Yeah, so usually, and then red is for like errors. And then I usually use like green or blue for like important concepts or like um headers because I think that'll like stand out more when I'm looking back at it. So like sometimes our professor in class will be like, this is very important, and then I'll switch to like a blue ink and then write it down. Yeah, does that help? Then what are the most important classes we should take in college that would help be a medicine? Okay, so um, I think like different colleges have different tracks, but in general, there's like a pre-med track where you had to take 2 semesters of general chemistry, and then you had to take physics, and then you had to take 2 semesters of organic chemistry, and then biochemistry and some bio classes. And then it's also helpful to like have psychology or English on the side. Um, but yeah, those are like the most important classes I would say. And then after that, it's kind of really flexible about like what you want to take. So like some people take computer science, some people take economics, and then some people take like different types of bio. Okay, and then since we're running a little bit tight on time, I just wanted to share our email, youthandpremed@gmail.com. You can always email us if you have any questions. And then we also have a new website, youthandpremed, wixsite.com. And that's where our previously recorded sessions are. And our Instagram is at youthandpremed if you want to follow for updates. And then just like in conclusion, we have like a um attendance or feedback form that we'd love if you guys could fill out. Um, but yeah, if you don't have any questions or anything else, you're free to go. I think we have like 1 minute left. So yeah, thank you for coming.